do I think about removing dams? And in terms of science, dam removal is a uncontrolled experiment. So it's a, if you think about the scientific method, if you learned it in grade school, usually you have control and an experiment, and you compare the two. You say, well, I'm going to take, a vial of water and do nothing to it and see what happens. I'll take a vial of water and add a drop of acid and see what happens, and I can compare the two and see what the difference is. And then I can clearly make an assessment of what my action had on that sample. In the case of dam removal, we don't have a control. So we say, okay, we think the best option is to remove the dams, we take them out, and then we start an uncontrolled experiment that we don't know the outcome of. We don't know what will happen if we did nothing. And so for me, taking the dams out is the most extreme option. It's an option that would could have an impact, but would be the last thing that you would choose. So for me, if your goal was to restore fishery habitat, you would start by looking below the dams. You would start by doing things like finding ways to do experiments that say, well, what if we moved a truckload of fish around the dams and see what they did? Track them and see if they were successful in finding habitat above the dams. You would do things like, can we use the dams to improve the migration and the habitat below the dams? So dams have cold water pools in them that are very beneficial for fish. They also have abilities to clean up the water quality. So some of the poor water quality above the dams is actually mitigated through the dams. They also can help mitigate flows, so we can have less high flood events and less severe droughts, and we can actually help the fish by managing the dams in a more optimal way. So for me, I think I'd like to, as a scientist, I'd like to understand more about those less severe options. I'd like to see, can we achieve some of the goals we have without blowing the dams up. So that's my opinion on the body of science. I'm not actually sure how long I've taken. In terms of what we need next, I'd like to see that we have a way to develop science in these kinds of endeavors that we can actually trust. How can we get the government to put forward science that is transparent and clearly looks at all the options and that we can have a trust in as the public? I also want to see if we can find ways to enhance that through independent peer review, but also looking at all the alternatives. So right now, based on the KBRA and KHSA, any alternative that doesn't involve removing dams isn't even considered by the Department of Interior. So that's a problem. There needs to be a way to consider other options that don't involve dam removal, but also meet the objectives. This is an important issue because we're talking about a very expensive proposition. It could cost at least $1 billion, and some estimates say about $4 billion once all of the recovery and efforts are put forward. Another thing that I'm constantly asking myself is why? What's the motivation for all this? Why is the government pursuing this agenda so forcefully? I was just asking myself in the last few days, why is the Secretary of the Interior so insistent on this agenda when he actually comes from a ranching background in Colorado and has had a policy in the past of diverting rivers and building dams and doing development? How has he all of a sudden changed to this environmentalist trying to take out dams and restore rivers once he became the Secretary of the Interior? And then that's just the tip of the iceberg. So why all these agencies kind of look like they're colluding towards going after dam removal in such an aggressive way. And initially I came to just two possibilities. One is there's a policy agenda. So there's a policy in the government for environmental restoration, for river restoration. It could be to do with the America's Great Outdoors initiative. But I think there's a desire by the Department of Interior to create a legacy of restoring streams and rivers. But also I think it probably has something to do with money. So we're looking at gigantic amounts of money. And we're also looking at Pacificorp, the owner of the dams, getting essentially a gift from the taxpayers in this situation. So the agreement caps their liability. And any costs above about $400 million is the responsibility of the taxpayers. So if I were Pacificorp and saw these liabilities, eventually they're going to have to do something about these dams. They're going to have to retrofit them, improve them, take the sediment out of the reservoirs. If it's not now, it could be 50 years from now. They may need to do some mitigation of the dams in the future. If they can get a huge gift from the taxpayers, why not now? So that could be just the tip of the iceberg, but with these amounts of money involved, I think that's an obvious motivation. That's about all I have. I think we've been about an hour here. I'd love to take some questions.
Trying to find the